And we're back. Back in the saddle again. I can't sing, I know. And I'm not going to subject you to that. It sounds more like a goat being run over by a tractor trailer. Anyway, we're back with another episode of Woke Nation Podcast. It's the 11th of February, and a lot of things have happened since I've put out another previous episode. There's been, of course, a lot of news because things happen at a whiplash pace these days. It seems like every day, especially if you're plugged into social media, that there's a fresh outrage for everyone to comment on. Before I get into this episode, though, I do want to say I'm always kind of searching for new, I don't know if avenues is the right word, but new directions to take the podcast to kind of keep it fresh. I've noticed that there is no shortage of podcasts and YouTube shows and TV cable shows like Tucker Carlson or the Laura Ingraham show, Sean Hannity on cable. Michael Savage has a podcast. Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, The Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, Christopher Scott, who has a great show that I listen to. There's no shortage of these guys that very concisely and using logic, reason, and common sense debate and unmask the liberal agenda for the absurdity that it is. But these shows spend most of their time going through the news as it comes out, the latest news, and usually broadcasted in a news type format, going over the issues and debating them, and more or less, it's a news format. There's no shortage of those type of shows, owning the libs. There's no shortage of guys that go out there and own the libs, as it were. Ben Shapiro's great at it. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, as I said. If you want a little more of an independent thought, a little outside the box, there's Michael Savage, Christopher Scott. If you are a diehard Republican, you have Laura Ingraham or Tucker Carlson, kind of, but well, he's against the establishment, and but there's no shortage of these type of people, and I like and listen to everyone that I just listed there, with the exception of maybe Michael Savage. I don't listen to him as much, and not as much Laura Ingraham like I used to ever since her radio show ended. I haven't really gotten into her new podcast, so if anyone knows whether it's good or not, let me know, but I just haven't had the time to dig into it. But, there's Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman, I think his name is, or Bachman, Steve Deasy. But what I've noticed is that there is a shortage of humor, of satire on the right, and that's the saying goes that politics is downstream from culture. It's the culture that sets the pace and the standard for where we're at in the country, and politics follows after. So it is good and fine to debate the political issues. But I think that human beings respond to narrative. They respond to stories. That's why books and movies and music has a greater impact on setting the tone of where the culture is at, rather than policy. Policy usually follows after. And I've noticed that humor is one of the greatest affectors of where we are. People respond. Humor is one of those things that's undeniable. You laugh, it's involuntary. If something's funny, you're going to laugh no matter what. So a lot of truth can be brought out using satire and humor and mockery, to disprove and show the fallacies and the absurdities of an opposing worldview. And I think there's a great shortage of that on the conservative, on the right side. There's only a handful of people that I can really think of that use humor, generally speaking. Now, all the guys that I listed can be funny from time to time. Matt Walsh is sarcastic; he can be funny, but it's not a humorous show. He doesn't use satire very often that I know of, except my mom reads his articles and she tells me he uses it a lot, but he's not a satirist, you know what I mean? He's just not. Now, I, and again, going back to humor unites you, unites people. Um, I just as an example with myself, I love South Park. I think South Park. I don't always agree with the points they make, and don't hold me to task. I don't support their vulgarity and some of the crassness of the humor, but I love this satirical. The way they use satire in South Park to mock and ridicule, and they use it a lot of times to make fun of political correctness and the Democrat ideology. Um, I think that's far more effective in a lot of ways than just owning the libs through logic, which I am not in any way discounting. Um, but South Park's not a conservative show. They may make some conservative points, but they're not a conservative show. But yet I can enjoy them and love the humor and the sharpness of the wit and the satire. Another example is Mad Magazine. I subscribe to Mad. And I mean, nothing puts a smile on my face when the latest issue of Mad comes in the mailbox. Um, Mad's been around forever, but it's a cultural landmark, and it's influenced countless generations and countless artists and writers for Saturday Night Live, stand-up comedians, etc., etc. Another one that I wish that was still around, but it's not, is the National Lampoon magazine. They're just that's another episode I'll do, I think, coming up soon on literature, because I love to read the state of literature today in America. And when I talk about literature, I'm not talking about the latest, pop bestsellers that you see at the supermarket, like James Patterson or um, Tammy Hogue or any of those. Tom Clancy's dead, but in his heyday, or John Grisham or Michael Crichton, who's also passed away. But those pop names. Stephen King, I think, would be a little bit of an exception, even though he's a pop writer. He is a great, I think, above average storyteller. But those are not the guys that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual state of like literature, quality writing in America. And I'm going to do that in another broadcast coming up very soon, because there's a couple of British writers that I want to highlight that I think are really cutting edge and leading the direction of where literature could go, to where it's still entertaining and fresh and new and creating something original. And it's not talked about enough with social media and most of our entertainment being fed through YouTube and visual stimuli, rather than reading and jogging your memory or jogging your brain and using your imagination, which is far more valuable uh, to you than just being spoon fed CGI, like the Avengers or something like that. Just the special effects and extravaganza like you would get from James Cameron, Avatar, or something like that. It's just there's no comparison between that and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, the books. You know what I mean? There's things those books do that Peter Jackson could never do with his movie. Anyway, that's another broadcast coming up very soon. I want to get into those kinds of things. But I also want to take this podcast in a new direction, to where I'm not constantly just regurgitating or going on to Drudge. Well, I don't really read Drudge, but going on to Fox News's website, Fox Nation, or listening to these other podcasters like Knowles or Shapiro or Walsh or what have you, and kind of regurgitating back my own opinion on the stories in my own podcast. I want something new and that's set apart. And I think humor and satire is something that's largely ignored by the right. Like I said, there's a couple names, like Steven Crowder uses it. He uses a lot of humor to pinpoint his ideas and to combat the leftist ideology. Um, Gavin McInnes, if that's how you pronounce it, Gavin. He would be another one. And of course, what you've noticed, Milo Yiannopoulos would be another one. He's intellectual, but at the same time, he uses a lot of humor and mockery and satire to get his points across. And he's very underrated in that respect, I think. Um, certainly intellectually, he's underrated. I mean, I'm reading his new book, Diabolical, on the Catholic sexual abuse scandals with the priests, and it's so far a very good book, very well written, very insightful, and he uses humor also in that. His first book, Dangerous, did the same thing. So I think, and I think it's also important to point out that those who do use humor are usually some of the most effective voices within the conservative field, and they're also the ones that get banned the quickest. You know, if you look at what happened with Milo, he's been deplatformed off Twitter at least. Um, and he's been effectively shut down in a lot of ways with censorship. His tours, of course, get just completely derailed. He can't even speak at a college because the last time he tried in New York, the mayor of New York, de Blasio, intervened and prohibited him from even being able to have a talk in a college room that a professor had invited him to. So I see humor as something that the left is very afraid of in the conservatives' hands because their ideology is rife with opportunity to be mocked. I mean, just look at the news today. We'll be going. This is the last episode. I hope to be just pure going through the news. I never intended this to be like that, but then a lot of the news is so wild and outrageous you can't help but address it. I wanted to take on more of the social issues, theological and moral, but then again, like I said, the news is just so outrageous sometimes you have to. Like this Green New Deal. I'll be talking about that in a minute. The Northam, the governor of Virginia, advocating for infanticide. How do you not address that? But I want to address these things in upcoming episodes through the lens of satire and mockery, because these things should be mocked. They should be ridiculed. The Green New Deal is an absurd, stupid idea. I mean, it literally is a science fiction the outline to a science fiction story. That's all it is. I mean, I could do the same thing Cortez did and just sit there and talk about hot air balloons and flying rockets and farting cows, and you would get the same exact effect. We'll go into that in a second. But I just wanted to kind of touch base and put it out there to where I want to be headed. I think there's just, like I said, so many people out there that are just regurgitating the news and owning the libs through logic and reason, which and being serious about it, which I'm all for, and I listen to these guys and I support them. I like what they do. But if you're gonna kind of stand apart, you got to find your own um, genre and style. And I think I'm better suited for like mocking what they say and do, the liberals. I mean, rather than just logically dismantling it. I feel like I could do both, but I think if you merge the two together, it's far more effective and more entertaining. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, these podcasts are supposed to be entertaining. It's not just supposed to be some boring lecture or me just spouting off my opinions. You know, you should be able to get something out of it. Something maybe to entertain at the same time and take your mind off the issues, your problems, and escape for a little while. That's the whole point of entertainment. You know, Tolkien said it best when he said those who would keep us from fantasy and from fiction and from using our imaginations, we call them the jailers. And that was Tolkien that said that. So, you know, it's something to keep in mind. And I think, again, some of the most effective voices in the culture throughout American history have always been satirists. You look at Mark Twain with Huckleberry Finn, or Joseph Heller with Catch-22, or Kurt Vonnegut with Slaughterhouse-Five and Cat's Cradle, The Sirens of Titan, Breakfast of Champions. These things had an impact at their time when they first came out, and now they're taught. You know, Thomas Pynchon with Gravity's Rainbow. My favorite political satire writer would be a very underrated writer, but at the same time well known to those who know postmodernist fiction in the 60s and 70s would be Robert Coover. I would encourage anyone to look into him. He wrote his most well-known book is The Public Burning, which had to do with Nixon and the Rosenbergs, which were a married couple. I forget their Julie Rosenberg. I forget the man's name. That were executed as communist spies during the 1950s. When Nixon, was he? I guess he was a senator. I'd have to. It's been a few years since I read the book, and I'm not familiar with the history as much. But yes, check out The Public Burning. It is absolutely hilarious and well written. It's a wild ride. Right up there with Pynchon. Thomas Pynchon wrote Gravity's Rainbow, which is one of the most notorious novels written in the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century, or the former of the latter. I always whatever. It was written in 1973. Okay, there you go, and the second half of the 20th century, and it's one of those books that is so littered with references to everything from science to pop culture to history to geography to comic book characters. It's a blizzard of references that you almost need to be very well educated to even know what Pynchon's talking about in Gravity's Rainbow. And there are books written like guides to help walk you through his novel. That's the kind of stuff I like, and that's what Coover does with The Public Burning. He has Uncle Sam as a literal character in it. He later sodomizes Richard Nixon at the end of the book, literally. It's an outrageous novel, and it was a bestseller in 1977 when it was first released, but then it was banned in a lot of ways because they were afraid that Nixon, still being alive at the time of its publication, would sue them for libel. So it was very, very, very difficult to get a copy of that book, which of course drew me to it even more because I love delving into works that have been controversial or censored. So yeah, and then he also wrote a short story called The Cat in the Hat for President, which was just re-released. It came out this year again in a new edition. And it couldn't be more timely, obviously, after the 2016 election, whether you like Trump or not. There's no denying that it was a cartoonish circus, the whole election against Hillary Clinton. And so, in the story, he took the Dr. Seuss format and had it where the cat in the hat is literally running for president, the same character in the Dr. Seuss books. So it's this cartoonish, wild character, and everyone fawns and falls in love. It's an outrageous, hilarious short story that ends in just absolute mayhem. Great read. I would recommend it. So I'm going to be getting into all that. Where literature can really come back and have its place again at the center of culture. Anyway, okay. So this episode I think is titled "Get Rid of Farting Cows and Airplanes and Bring on Blackface and Infanticide," because that's where we're at now today in America. We have arrived at a very hopeful period, in our nation's history. It's a mixed bag in a sense, I suppose. A lot of what I'm talking about revolves around the progressives' insistence that declining birth rates are fantastic. You have these groups of pro-choice activists who are now publicly shouting for after-birth abortions, which is murder by anyone's definition. Literally anyone's definition. The baby is born, and you have this racist swine, Governor Northam, who advocated for killing the child as it lay comfortably, quote unquote, beside the mother. Now, if I just for to think about this a little outside the box, if I was an immigrant coming up from South America or Mexico, I wouldn't be all that happy because we have these liberal progressives who aren't reproducing. See, they use condoms or Plan B or Zyklon B or cyanide, coat hangers, lawn clippings if they have to avoid the scourge of having a cute bundle of joy. But how are these immigrants supposed to feel, huh? So the party, the Democrats, most advocating for them, the immigrants, to enter illegally, to be allowed in no matter what, are terrified of having kids. And even when they do have kids, they kill them. So they're actively working to reduce the citizen population of the U.S., but they want to supplement that loss by bringing in illegal immigrants. Like I said, if I was an immigrant, I'd be a little apprehensive. Wouldn't you? This party advocating for you to be here is engaged in slaughtering all natural new arrivals. Not very encouraging, to say the least. But anyway, I'm concerned with the population as well. With the influx of immigrants, our numbers will swell. I think we're projected to be somewhere around 400 million by 2050. Something like that, right? So what do? The Democrats have to be right. It's the population, stupid. I'm wondering how much farther we can go with this madness, though. In a way, I think it's a good thing for the pro-life movement that Northam directly advocated for infanticide. It means the gloves are off, the mask is removed. Now, granted, I believe all abortion is murder, not just third trimester abortions or afterbirth abortions, which is literally infanticide. But this debate over infanticide has brought the abortion arguments to their logical, murderous conclusions. And I find it extremely revealing that the calls for Northam's resignation started not when he called for infanticide, but after a picture of him was released in either blackface or KKK garb. And it was published by Big League Politics, just to give them their credit and their due. People like Mike Cernovich like to be opportunists and publish the photos themselves and try to take credit for things that they didn't really do. We're all on to you, Cernovich, so just go screw yourself and, go be an opportunist with something else. Maybe you can start selling vitamins on InfoWars or something like that. Anyway, I'm not going to rehash the whole story surrounding Northam and where his career is at. Honestly, I'm tired of following, as I said, the outrage machine. The media machine that latches onto sensationalized story, spins talking points, milks said story for optimum emotional impact, reduces any meaningful debate or conversation to worthless sound bites, then, when the story fizzles, steps away and latches onto the next outrage or controversy. So, yeah. Let's see. Where was I? I'm also very skeptical of these constant accusations of sexual assault, which are hurled back and forth between parties as if this is the latest round of Family Feud, and a very dark one. It's odd and a tad suspect that whenever there is a controversy, the central figures involved are often suddenly embroiled in rape accusations. Now, I'm not saying the stories, accusations against Fairfax, Justin Fairfax, who's the lieutenant governor of Virginia, who's supposed to replace Northam, I'm not saying they aren't true. I haven't even paid close attention to them or read into the details. I'm just saying that it doesn't give me a good, warm, fuzzy feeling to see pivotal figures suddenly annihilated by rape charges that seemingly come out of nowhere, usually happened many years prior, and always beg the question of why. Why is the accuser suddenly coming forward now? Why? In Fairfax's case, why did these women wait until now? I don't mean to insult any true victims. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I just find it odd and a bit suspect that every time a politician or celebrity seems to come under intense media focus, suddenly then a number of victims decide to spring from the woodwork. It begs the question, are there groups of investigators that go out looking for these victims? Obviously, this has to be the answer. The opposing party sends out their operatives to find dirt. And what better dirt these days than to find a rape victim or a racist photo or video? You find something like that and you've effectively ruined every aspect of their career. I mean everything. Doesn't matter how old the picture is or how flimsy the accusations may be. In America today, you're guilty even if proven innocent. So Northam is refusing to resign, and I say God bless him. This will only help Virginia Republicans and the party as a whole. Northam is a walking black eye to the concept that the Democrats are the virtuous party, the party for minorities and victims. So stay in office, you worthless scum, and keep proving us right. And Justin Fairfax, he has the same odds for survival as the people of Pompeii. So give it up, brother. Moving on, though, it's been a wild week or so since my last episode, as I've been saying, with the outrage machine that goes 24/7 and never ends. There's one thing politics promises these days, and that's entertainment. I used to look to Hollywood and read celebrity bios for excitement. If I craved a good adventure story, a real one, someone who genuinely lived on the edge, I'd pluck up a Keith Moon or Jim Morrison bio from the shelf. But I don't need to do that today. I used to have to contrive my comedy, maybe catch an old Monty Python episode, or Saturday Night Live back in its glory, long before the idiots that are on there today. But I don't have to do that. No, if I want comedy, I look no further than Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. Yes, it's the intellectual muse of the Democratic Party. I mean the Socialist Party. This veritable erudite powerhouse of communism. The bleeding heart of the dumb Democrats everywhere. Yes, Plato and Aristotle with boobs and an estrogen overload. Here she is, AOC. And she's written the new gospel. Yes, the gospel according to Cortez. And I say that because this Green New Deal that she's released is sweeping in its reforms. It's not only an environmental statement, it's a reform of every aspect of our lives. The whole text of her plan is available online, and I've read the dang thing twice. And I just want to say honestly, this plan is probably the most imaginative work of fiction since Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. And it's about as factual as that classic work. Look, this plan cleverly couches its insidious socialistic endeavors in reforms we all, in theory, can agree on. She wants to reduce poverty. She wants to stop the destruction of protected wilderness and endangered species. Heck, I can get on board with all that. To be honest, I'm very disturbed by the wholesale slaughter of animals like elephants for their ivory. And I can't stand the out-of-control burning and logging of the Congo, Amazon, and Indonesian rainforests. And, to be clear, I find the conservative response to these issues to be tepid, to say the least. And I'll address all that in another episode. But let me just say that I've noticed, for the most part, well, actually a lot, of conservatives seem to brush off the concerns raised on overlogging or poaching as being somehow part of the liberal climate change movement. But I don't see that at all, and I don't see how anyone who honestly looks at the issue could say that either. I don't like that on the whole conservatives don't focus on the destruction of the last great wildernesses of the world. With the exception of Michael Savage, I've heard almost no one mention it. Anyway, like I said, AOC's Green New Plan is truly mind-boggling. She plans, and this is according to her, and by the way, her plan now, if you go read it, is not, I don't think, the original plan that was put out. They've severely edited portions of it and some of the supporting documents. So the plan that I'm referencing here and now in this episode is the original plan. And some of the other things that I'm going to bring out, like farting cows, those were put in supporting documents. Some of the other statements, like workers who don't want to work should be paid anyway, they were in supporting documents put out there by people who are advising her. They've been edited and taken out since then, but they were there to begin with, so don't be fooled. Anyway, like I said, AOC's Green New Deal is truly mind-boggling. She plans within 10 years to get rid of absolutely all farting cows. Now, according to those like AOC, farting cows are a huge part of carbon emissions and CO2. Therefore, they contribute greatly to climate change. And you heard that right, farting cows. And these are people that you want to take seriously, and I really do. And to be fair, the portion that blames farting cows was removed from her website, but it was there to start with. It seems people had a hard time taking that bit seriously, and I can't imagine for the life of me why. But I would love to ask her why she has this insane prejudice against cows. Don't we all fart? I know I do. Heck, I farted through the reading of her Green New Plan, her Green New Deal. I farted through the whole thing. And I didn't see CO2 levels raise at all. Maybe they did. I think it all depends on what you eat. What do cows eat that make them fart and they're so deadly to the environment? I think that's what you should look at. And how are you going to get rid of these cows? How does she propose to get rid of every single farting cow? What are we going to do? Introduce a national kill all farting cows day where we all go and get a gun and shoot cows? No, no, no. AOC hates guns, so that won't work. But she does promise, right at the beginning of her plan, that there will be millions of new jobs added if we enact her ideas. She doesn't explain where any of these jobs would come from. Maybe killing these farting cows could be a start. Not much of a career path, and it would probably only appeal to psychopaths, but hey, money's money, right? Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could create a business that just kills farting cows. Now, I mean, after a year or two, you might run out of cows to shoot, and then you could move on to other animals that fart and eventually work your way up to people, which is what they're doing anyway. So basically, just kill everything that moves on the planet, and climate change will end. So moving past the deadly farting cows, AOC says we need to get rid right now, right away, of cars, airplanes, taxis, buses, all of it. No more. Any fossil fuel movement must be eliminated. And in its place, trains. Yes, trains. We're going to build railways across the whole country. Across the ocean, presumably, because that's where planes really come in handy. So railways across the Pacific Ocean and across the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and just about every other, the Mediterranean, the Dead Sea, supposedly, which is where her plan should be thrown. She doesn't account at all for the millions of lost jobs her plan would cause. I mean, America is now the #1 exporter of oil, so say goodbye to that. Natural gas jobs, sayonara. Electricity would be no more as well, so goodbye PPL, Citgo, and friends. Our economy would crash if we did this. The whole plan is outlandish and stupidity. You cannot take any of it seriously, and yet people are. Also, much of the plan has nothing to do with the environment, which is what I think most people are suspicious about. She talks about drastically reducing the military budget. Why? To help pay for her plan, I would assume. But what about our enemies? What about protecting American citizens? Not important. Global warming must be stopped. That's the only thing that matters. She talks about enacting policies that would get rid of racism, poverty, and income inequality. What the frick does that have to do with the environment? Nothing. Nothing at all. And there, my friends, in a nutshell, is precisely why I and many conservatives are very, very skeptical of this whole liberal, frantic push to change every aspect of our society to combat this mysterious foe, global warming. I find it extremely suspect that this Green New Deal of AOC's moves to use absolute government control to change practically all of our culture and society and government. This isn't an environmental plan. This is socialism/communism control couched and hidden in a seductive argument for saving the poor trees and animals, except the farting cows. And she and her cronies are using hysterics to throw otherwise sensible people off their rockers. If you believe that our whole world is going to end in 12 years unless we do something now, unless we abolish all fossil fuel, then you just may be willing to hand over your liberties and values in order to preserve life. Folks, don't be fooled or taken in by this garbage. Contrary to what the Democrats want you to believe, the science is actually still very much out as to whether humans are the main contributors to climate change, or farting cows, I might add. Also, AOC's plan would only change things in America. Keep that in mind. Only in America. And America, according to the experts, is not responsible for most of the pollution and CO2. No, no. That goes to India, China, Vietnam, and a lot of other third world countries that are now developing into first world countries. It's in a lot of countries that are poverty stricken that we find the most littering and pollution. Developing Asian countries are responsible for over 90% of plastic litter and the majority of carbon emissions and pollution on the whole. So changing things here in America, even on such a drastic scale, isn't going to do a dang thing for the whole world. So don't believe this nonsense, this seductive communism. It's a lie, pure and simple. I haven't been able to decide whether AOC is stupid or evil, but either way, she's not someone to be listened to or believed. She openly proclaims the benefits of socialism, just like, what's his name, Bernie Sanders, who looks like Doc from Back to the Future. And as I always say, back in the DeLorean with you, Doc, and ciao. On a final note, when pressed, AOC says her brand of socialism, the socialism she claims really works, which she puts the word democratic in front of it as if that changes anything. That's like saying friendly Nazi. It doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything. It's a lie. But she claims the socialism that really works isn't the kind that you see currently ravaging Venezuela. No, she points to the Nordic countries like Norway and Sweden. Bernie Sanders has done the same exact thing. The problem with that is that Norway and Sweden are not traditionally socialistic countries. In fact, Norway and Sweden have changed many of their infrastructure policies to make their governments and their their system, more capitalistic, because they know and found out through experience that pure socialism never works. Now, they do have a welfare state in a sense, so there is some socialistic policies in effect over there, but they are not purely socialist countries. If you want to see what that looks like, you can look to Russia or Venezuela or Cuba or a dozen other places that have tried to use the system and failed on their face, falling flat on their face. So claiming that these Nordic countries like Norway and Sweden benefit or support your argument is disingenuous and dishonest. And in fact, representatives in both of those countries have criticized Bernie Sanders and AOC and others like them for claiming that they are socialist countries. They've come out actually very upset that people like AOC are using them as an example for what they claim socialism should look like and that should be enacted here in America. I find it also very interesting that some of the Venezuelan refugees that have come into our country seeking asylum from the ravages that socialism has enacted in their own country, when they see what is going on here and what people like AOC are trying to enact here in America, they cry out against it. And they have been quoted as saying, please don't do what we've done to our country here. So yes, excuse me. If you want to know, again, what socialism looks like, check out Venezuela, crack open a history book, or check out Russia in the 1950s. Okay? That will tell you all that you need to know. This pure madness you're watching the disintegration of the Democrat Party, basically. It's going through a tremendous metamorphosis right now. You're seeing the old guard being slowly driven out and eliminated, some by age, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which people are playing Where's Waldo with her right now. She may be dead. They may be pulling some kind of Weekend at Bernie's thing with her. Who knows? But you are seeing the old guard being pushed out. Nancy Pelosi's in control now, but she's actually not as powerful as you would think. And I think in a lot of ways she's a political prisoner of her own party. She has the extremists like AOC on one hand, which are representing a large portion of the millennial population now who seem to, on the whole, favor socialism, stupidly. And on the other hand, they're investors, they're lobbyists who are more moderate. So Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and numerous others like them are between a rock and a hard place in a lot of ways. And that usually doesn't last. We'll see what happens, but the party is slowly being torn to pieces by these radical new names within it, and the old guard who thus far are refusing to die and go out and gently into that good night. We'll have to watch and see what happens with that. I'm sure it'll be humorous and fun to watch them tear each other to pieces. That's what's coming, inevitably. It's going to be a power struggle. AOC and Nancy Pelosi, for the most part, haven't gone to war on a visceral and public level just yet, but that is coming. One of the first things that AOC did once she got into Congress was join the protesters in Nancy Pelosi's office. She did it publicly. She's a stunt. She's a headline grabber and a stunt. She performs stunts, that grabs attention. Like trying to hunt down Mitch McConnell during the government shutdown. And she was so stupid she was in the wrong building to find his office. It's gonna get good. It really is. And like I said, with the new direction I'm gonna be going, we're only gonna be getting more and more joy and pleasure and laughs out of it. That's what I want to do. I want to enjoy this. I want to laugh at it. I want to make fun of it. You're going to be watching a lot of it's amusing to watch your enemies tear themselves to pieces, and that's what's going to happen. We just got to make sure that we keep our heads above the fray and come out on the other side of this victorious, and encourage them in every way possible to kill themselves. Not literally, politically, like Northam's doing. That's political suicide, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, next week I will be exhibiting my extensive culinary skills when I teach you how to catch, prepare, cook, and eat a vegan. You heard that right. We're going to bring back cannibalism. I think it's about high time that we bring that back, since all the rest of our values and morals have been thrown by the wayside. So cannibalism it is. So join me next week. There will be another episode next week on cannibalism, how to eat a vegan. Subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, download the Podbean app, or on YouTube, where all these episodes are published. I'll be putting on more videos shortly. Like and follow the Facebook page, and please leave a review on iTunes. It's how the show gains more exposure. And you can also email me at roadnottaken04@juno.com. Send in any kind of emails you like, support, criticism, mockery, abuse, I don't care. Prayer requests even, you can do that. And that's roadnottaken04@juno.com. ROADNOTTAKEN04@juno, JUNO.com. Yes, Juno still exists. No, I don't know how. Okay. Join us again next week, how to eat a vegan. In the meantime, good night and God be with you.